everybody, I'm Elizabeth Hines from OurPaleoFamily.com, and I'm back with another Instant Pot recipe, and this is a throwback recipe. So we are having porcupines tonight. Did anybody grow up a child of the 70s having porcupines? Do you know what I'm talking about? This is not roadkill or anything like that. It's ground beef with rice. And so as the beef sort of shrinks away, the rice looks like the little quills of a porcupine. Cooked in a tomatoey sauce. And they're delicious. I'm sure as a kid, when my parents told me that's what was for dinner, I said, yuck, I don't want that. But once I actually tried it, I realized that they're delicious. And it's so funny, so what I'm doing is I'm chopping half of an onion. My onion was really small, so it's actually about 2/3 of an onion, and 1 clove of garlic. So I'm just going to chop these up. I have about a tablespoon of avocado oil in there. Saute more, and I'm just going to start cooking these. So I've been searching for recipes to try in the Instant Pot to paleo-fy them, and so many are just like something that I would do on my stovetop. You know, you brown your meat and vegetables or whatever, and then end up cooking it in here under pressure for like 3 minutes, and I just feel like I don't want to get my Instant Pot out for that. So I went back to my cookbooks. When I got married, my mom asked for recipes from my relatives. So I have recipes handwritten by aunts and my grandmothers and of course my mom, and it's really special, and they're favorite recipes that I ate growing up, and I love just flipping through it, and almost all of them are recipes that I can't eat, you know, that we can't eat on paleo diet. But that doesn't mean we can't make them okay for paleo. So that's what I'm doing. And in fact, this recipe would be totally fine on paleo if you eat rice. And paleo is no grains, but it is pretty generally accepted in the functional medicine world now that some grains, some non-gluten containing grains are fine, and there are health benefits to them, and white rice, I know, happens to be one of them. So I'm going to mix up my meatballs in just a second. Instead of rice, though, I'm using rice cauliflower, and I used to always make mine by putting a real head of cauliflower in the food processor, but no matter how you do that, it makes a humongous mess. And so one day I just splurged and I bought this. This is bird's eye, and you steam it right in the bag. I'm sure that's not fabulous, whatever this bag is made out of, but sometimes just real life, right? This is really fast. It's 4 minutes in the microwave. But I love the taste of it and the texture. If I cook this on 4 minutes, it's a really great texture, and I enjoy that. So I'm using this for my rice tonight, and I actually did microwave it for 2 minutes just to thaw it a bit, so it'll be easier for me to work with. I'll go ahead and dump that in there since it was in my hand. Now this recipe just had onion in it, but I added a little bit of garlic as far as vegetables go. But I always want to add more vegetables if I can, and the first thing I thought of was squash. I thought zucchini or yellow squash would be delicious in this, but I'm out. It's getting close to the end of the week. I didn't have any, but I had some cremini mushrooms. So I have about 4 ounces of cremini mushrooms, half of one of those little packages, and I have a red bell pepper, and I'm going to chop these up, and I'm going to go ahead and just saute them with my onions and garlic, and that will be fine. They can just saute until I have my meatballs ready, and we'll move on with the rest of our process. So this recipe made the original way in the oven with rice took about an hour to bake. So it will be a good use of our Instant Pot, because it'll make it, 15 or so minutes for this prep time, and then about 15 minutes under pressure. So I'm just going to use half of this. The rest of my pepper, I'll just slice up, and my kids will enjoy snacking on it. or bell peppers in general are one of those things that that were red on my Cyrex Labs report, meaning a definite immune trigger for me, and I should not eat them. But I went without for a long time, and now I've started eating them on occasion. So I'll probably end up picking this out for the most part, but I'll eat a couple bites of pepper, and I love it. My jambalaya recipe, which is probably my favorite recipe that I've created in the last year. My family loves it too. We just love it. And bell peppers are a big part of that recipe. And so when that's on the menu in the future, I kind of save up for my bell pepper consumption. So we're going to mix up our meatballs here with our bag of cauliflower rice. This, of course, will all be written up on the website, but it is a 10-ounce bag. If you wanted to use rice, you would use 1/2 of a cup of uncooked rice. I have 1 pound of ground beef, and to this I'm going to add, sorry, I mean my measuring spoon. One teaspoon of salt. That's a 1/2 teaspoon measure. Okay, a teaspoon of salt. 1/4 of a teaspoon of black pepper, and a 1/2 teaspoon of celery salt. Celery salt is very much sort of a retro flavor, but I love it. So I'm kind of mixing those spices into my cauliflower, which will help me get it evenly distributed into my meat. And then to start breaking it up. So you definitely need your meat to be thawed for this. You know, a lot of times, I've said before, I forget to get my meat out of the freezer, and then I end up having to cook something not exactly as planned, or it takes a little bit longer because it's frozen. You really can't make meatballs out of frozen meat. I'm going to get both hands in here. So this is a lot of cauliflower. Ideally, I would have probably used a little bit less than that 10-ounce bag, but I just didn't want to waste it. So I just threw the whole thing in here. And if not all of the cauliflower gets incorporated, it's totally fine. I'll just throw it in there in the pot. Because what we're going to end up with is our vegetables cooking down there. And then we're going to have our meatballs, which we're going to kind of nestle down in. I'm going to make these, I almost said the size of a snowball. That's ridiculous. I don't know what made me say that. Smaller than a tennis ball, bigger than a ping pong ball. It's kind of a medium size. You could weigh them if you want, but I'm not going to go to that much trouble. They'll stay together pretty nicely. There's not too much stuff in there. Sometimes if you get too much stuff in a meatball mix, they won't stay together very well. Just kind of feel it as you're making them. You can tell it was a little too big, a little too small. I'm flinging it all over the place. Usually I brown whatever kind of meat I'm cooking with. It's almost always I brown it. In this particular case we're not, which makes it fast and easy. I'm just going to scrape this little bit of cauliflower out, a couple little bits of meat. I just don't want to waste anything. I can smell those veggies. I can tell they're caramelizing down there. This is what I want. Perfect. Okay, so now I'm going to add my liquid. So I want 1 tablespoon of coconut aminos, which normally I don't measure. Just pour some in. I'm going to be good and measure. The original recipe called for Worcestershire sauce, which is actually an okay ingredient to use, but we're so used to using the aminos with paleo cooking, I have it handy. I'm going to stir that, use this liquid to deglaze the bottom of your pan, and then the bulk of our liquid is, you see how weird that looks? I have a cup of tomato sauce and a cup of chicken broth, and my broth was really dark because I made my roast chicken in the Instant Pot, earlier in the week, and this broth is left over from that. So it has all of those herbs, the sage, and I can't remember what else is in there, thyme maybe. And it's just really rich because I cooked a whole chicken. So that makes a really flavorful broth. So certainly that's going to add some extra flavor to this dish for me. If you don't have great homemade broth, that's no problem. But number one, I would encourage you to make it. So I have a recipe, I have videos on that. But if that's just not something that you want to take the time to do, that's fine. No judgment, but definitely take some time to find a good one. Read the ingredients. There's soy, sugar, cornstarch. There's all kinds of crazy ingredients in a lot of packaged bone broths. Well, most of them aren't even bone broth, but there are a couple on the market that are actually bone broth. Pacific is one that's pretty new, I think, and kind of a reasonable price. Honestly, it doesn't taste nearly as good as homemade broth. It just doesn't. But at least it is full of the minerals and the protein that you get from bone broth. So you might want to add, you might need to add a little extra seasoning or something if you use a packaged broth. Let me just taste this and make sure it tastes good. Super, super good. Really flavorful. Okay. So now all I'm going to do, let me make sure this is right before I... Oh yes, the original recipe has some sugar in it. I think just like a tablespoon of sugar. So if you want that little bit of sweetness, you could add a tablespoon of honey. I probably do honey rather than maple syrup in this particular recipe. And this little piece of cauliflower is stuck to me. You could use some stevia, liquid stevia if you wanted, but we're just going without the sweetness. So I'm not going to add that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. And I'm just going to carefully nestle my little meatballs down in the sauce. I ended up with 10. You need to be careful with them at this stage, of course. But I do want to just real carefully spoon a little sauce on top, or flip them over. I'm going to use my other spoon. I know I tasted with that one, but it's just my family. We're not a restaurant over here. Okay. And then my lid goes on. Sure this gasket is in there. Move that valve to sealing, and we want manual 15 minutes. Okay, I'll see you back here in a few minutes. Hey everybody, I'm back. Our porcupines have cooked for 15 minutes at high pressure, and it only took about 5 minutes for the pressure to build up. And then I did a quick release a couple minutes once it finished. So really 25 minutes of cooking time there, about 10 minutes of prep. So it's a pretty quick preparation. So I'm just going to turn this off, and then I'm going to turn saute back on, and I'm going to adjust it to normal. Let's see. What am I doing wrong? Oh, I'm pressing the wrong button. Adjust. There we go. Normal, which is like the medium. And I'm going to, as soon as that starts to simmer, I'm going to add my thickener, just because I want the broth a little bit thick. If you've watched any of my videos, you know I like that sort of gravy kind of consistency. So to keep it a lower carbohydrate load, I'm going to use my glucomannan, which is from the konjac root, basically a fiber supplement, and has less carbohydrate than something like arrowroot starch or cassava flour, one of those flour type thickeners that we could use on the paleo diet. So already we're simmering there. So I'm just going to do a half a teaspoon and a couple tablespoons of water. I didn't measure the water. The important part is the amount of glucomannan. And just pour that right in. It will gel up real quickly in your bowl, and it will not dissolve. So you really need to stir it and get it in real fast. And I'll quit stirring with that little thing. Y'all, it smells really good. These taste amazing. And if you had a whole bunch of vegetables, you could easily add to that. Like I said at the outset, I had a bell pepper and a few mushrooms, but you could add squash, anything you like really, and make this like a soup, a one-pot meal. And so here we have a variety of leftover vegetables that were in my fridge. We have a little bit of mashed cauliflower. Here's some roasted cauliflower and broccoli and one little potato. This is not a vegetable. This is a rice pasta. We had spaghetti last night, and I found a new kind of, that's thick already, I'm going to turn that off, a new kind of gluten-free pasta at Aldi, and so I bought that, and we've been trying that. And this is my, I don't know, 18th attempt at gluten-free bread, which tastes delicious but is really crumbly, and it made really good garlic bread. So that's what we had last night. So we'll eat up these little bits of vegetables, and then we'll also have a big green salad on the side. Greens, that was the other thing I was trying to think of that would be really good in this, some Swiss chard or kale or even spinach, and it would just kind of melt right down, and you would get all those nutrients, but nobody would know. I have a child in the other room giving me the hairy eyeball whenever I talk about hiding vegetables. Actually, my kids are really good about eating vegetables. I don't really have to hide them, but let me just dish this up so I can show you what they look like. So they're not quite as porcupine-y looking as they would be if they were made with rice, but it's no problem. They're full of all that yummy and nutritious cauliflower. And here's one I broke up in the pot before, so I'll pull that one out. So the cauliflower really just kind of dissolves in there. So again, if you have somebody who might go ooh to cauliflower, it adds a nice texture to the meat, but you really can't even tell that it's in there. And the tomato sauce has so much flavor. And again, I used the broth that came from roasting my chicken in the Instant Pot, so my broth was really yummy broth. It was really full of flavor, so that definitely added a little extra something. And I really recommend you do that. For example, I talked about my jambalaya earlier. I plan to make carnitas or some other kind of pork roast in the Instant Pot, because that will involve adding some broth. That will be the liquid that I cook in. Almost always I cook with broth. Unless I happen to be out, I'll use water, but I hate to do that. So then that resulting yummy porky broth that comes from my pork roast or carnitas, which has some spices like garlic and onion and cumin, then I use that broth to make my jambalaya. So I'm layering in that extra flavor. Now you don't have to do that, but if you can think about it, it's a good way to really be a good steward of what you have. You're using all of those bits and pieces that someone that might just throw out from cooking their roast. You're going to use that, and it will just make your other dish better. So let me give this a taste. It's really yummy. The broth has so much flavor. That little bit of bell pepper. It's really, really good. It's yummy. I really recommend that you make this. And again, you can make it with the rice if you want to. But it's delicious with the cauliflower rice. And I think next time I might double it, because I think everybody's going to love this. So check out my website, Our Paleo Family, for this recipe and lots of others, plus lots of other great information that might be helpful to you. And best of luck. I hope you enjoy getting in your kitchen cooking. Thanks, everybody.